Okay, happy Friday morning. It looks like finally here at Arizona we're getting some rain, so very exciting times ahead. Having said that, I ask that you all take care if you're on the roads. I do know that most of us Arizonans here are not super familiar with navigating with the rain, so take the extra few moments on the traffic just to be on the safe side. I also have already had one of these live online sessions this week. We had one on Wednesday. In fact, that was actually a recording one recording that I prepared in the evening. So it is available for you on the Canvas course as well. These live online sessions. If I do get students who join and they have other things they want to talk about, I'm always happy to do so. So I don't always record everything unless it's a kind of a good fit for that. I'm very open to have other dialogues, discuss about things that come up either over a recording or off recording, depending on the nature of the things that students bring forward to me. But I thought that it would be still nice for us to have this Friday morning session together. And since I do not have attendance at this moment, which is totally okay, like I said, this is an asynchronous course, so it is not expected for you to join in a live setting. I do still want to provide this session of going through some of the highlights of the weekly material. You do have the full lecture material available on the Canvas course, but I think it's also useful to have these kind of a nutshell or a crash course versions of what we cover each week available for you. So without a further ado, let's make a start. Let's have a look at what I have lined up for us this week, week 9, when we're looking to the kind of the introduction to the muscle tissue as our topic. So here I have the agenda for today. I want to start by just acknowledging the great work you are doing. I think unless I get live participation, we'll just use this as a chance to review the content from chapter 11. Um, if possible, we'll also might venture into having a look of the homework, depending on how timings go. And as always, I do want to encourage you to reach out to me should you have any questions, whether it is in this live setting or whether it is in another setting. So let's start with this one. And I want to make sure that I'm very, very clear and transparent that I know that asynchronous online classes are sometimes uh, kind of harder to create that sense of community, create that interactive element. And I'm very, very impressed and very appreciative for all of you who are part of this class. You have really excelled in doing that despite the asynchronous nature. So I see the great work you're sending in. I see the amazing participation on the discussion forums. I do think that you have submitted some very outstanding um, short answer responses. And this week we'll even add to that by doing more virtual based labs. So there is a real community in this class, and that is thanks to you. I obviously, as a facilitator, will always try to create that, but it is every class, every group is unique, and you guys are definitely stepping up to the plate and showcasing how to create that in an online setting. I also wanted to recognize the great work that you're submitting. Like I said, I know sometimes there's a delay before you get feedback. I normally try to do it very quickly at the beginning of the next week after the due dates has been on Sunday. I try to get you feedback, but I do realize that sometimes being a student myself, it feels like there's a chore list of homework, but you are definitely each week submitting unique, new, novel thoughts. The standard of quizzes and submissions for the quizzes, submissions for the practice anatomy is outstanding, and all of these other activities that we as well do. Like I shared in the past, I've started to up a little bit more points towards the discussion forums. Remember, again, they are a completely voluntary activity that you can do, but I wanted to make sure that we create those spaces for that as well. So I'm very, very grateful for each and every one of you for being part of this class. I also wanted to be transparent, like I've shared in the passing. I myself do go to the school, and at times the workloads fluctuate. In addition to teaching, I do a few other things at the college as well. So this week, particularly, and especially the ending of this week, is a rather hectic time for me. So I do anticipate that I might take a little longer than usually. I usually try to respond to you within 24 hours. It might be a couple of days before I can respond to your messages, especially now with my own due dates knocking on the door. But you will hear back from me. If it's something urgent, I usually can spot that up. But if it is urgent and you haven't heard back from me in 24 hours, just resend that same message. I will definitely make sure it jumps to the top of the queue, and that way I can make sure that I get back to you. If it's not urgent, you definitely can expect to hear back from me at the beginning of the next week. I also wanted to mention, since I'm sometimes hearing a little bit of technology related concerns when we move on to these virtual labs, I do realize that it's a new format that we haven't done too much on this course. So if you're having any technology issues, I would really encourage you to make sure that A, you are working from a desktop or a laptop. So mobile phones are not generally particularly compatible with these virtual labs. So I would strongly encourage you to make sure that you're working from an actual computer, not a Padlet, not a mobile phone. If you do not have an access to a laptop, please do remember that our college does offer for registered students a chance to check out a laptop for one semester at the time. So go and reach out to our libraries. They should have some supplies. I've heard that at Williams campus they might have less at the moment, so maybe reaching out to the PECOS library and working through the process to making sure that you have access to the tools that you need to be successful on this class. So I really encourage you to do that as well. But like I said, any issues, do remember you're not alone, even though it's an asynchronous class. I'm very much here to be a partner in your learning. So reach out to me, we'll figure out. As you might have noticed, I'm usually very, very much of the mindset that we'll find solutions that work, and we'll figure out what I can do to help you. The secret to success in these online classes, however, is to collect those points every week. So please do not start skipping those unless you know that your grade is at the place where it won't be negatively impacted if you miss assignments. I also have recently spent a little bit of time starting my online sessions and also in-person sessions by doing a little bit of a reflective element. So I attended to a conference where Asian philosopher called Pueblo, his work was shared. He has published a book called Inward, which I have somewhere on my bookshelf. I was just looking at it before our session, and I have started a habit where I pick or have students to pick a random number between 2 and 225. Those are page numbers. And then we get one philosophical thought that we start our day with. And this week, when I was preparing for this session, in case I wouldn't have live audience, I picked up at page 114 just by pure random. And the thought that we were shared there was, I gather my habits and started releasing the ones that can never lead me to a lasting freedom and joy. And I think that that's a really good thought for us on this course when it comes to the learning habits, when it comes to how to approach the process of learning. So if something's working for you, please do capitalize on that. And if you notice that a certain learning technique isn't working for you, if certain element of materials that I share with you isn't working with you, do not feel that you have to keep going and doing something that's not beneficial. We had some great dialogue during the last exam during that week on our discussion forum of students sharing their best learning tips and tricks for this class. So I might refer you there as well. Sometimes it's good to try something new as well. So I encourage you to consider that as well as you are getting ready and preparing for a new week, how to tackle the material. Find those practices, capitalize on those. It is an important part of learning that you also are enjoying the learning process. So what is working for you, what is positive experience, do that. Don't force yourself to do something that's not working or that's not a beneficial part of your learning process. Of course, within the parameters of looking what will impact your grade and so on. So from that thought, let's have a look what we've got lined up for this week. This week, I have 3 homework elements for you. I have the familiar chapter quiz. I have the familiar chapter practice anatomy. You've done those before. You will complete them on our publisher's platform, and those grades will transfer directly to your Canvas courses grade book. Each one of those, I believe, is worth of 10 points. And in addition to that, I've added kind of a simulation activity. We'll be looking at electrical stimulation of skeletal muscles as we're embarking on this week's material. So that gives you kind of a chance to have a more of a lab experience, even in this online setting. So I really encourage you to explore that activity. It is fun. It does take a little bit of time. And like I said, make sure that you have a computer that's working. Make sure you're using, I think the recommended browser is Chrome. If you run into IT issues, you do know our publisher's website also has a great IT support. So I would encourage you to do that. Or alternatively, you can, of course, as well reach out to me. But the first place where we're going to start is trying to make sure that we get hold of our publisher's IT resources. But that simulation should be a rather good experience, rather fun experience. And I look forward to seeing your great work, as I'm sure it will be coming in from that as well. So with that all said, let's have a look of the key points from our learning material for this week. This week, we're making a start of looking at the muscle tissue. That's in preparation for next week when we will cover all of the most important muscles in the body. And I'm going to be totally transparent here as well and say that I think that covering all of those muscles next week is a fair bit of work. So if you do want, you can use the lighter workload this week as a chance to get started on the next week's material if you're concerned of your schedules during next week. So what muscles essentially do is that they convert energy, that cellular energy that we saw, the ATP, cellular energy currency, that we derived from, for example, from sugars from our diet. But what muscles do, they convert that ATP into mechanical energy. So creating movement or creating a force with a muscle. So that's really the nutshell version of what muscles do. As this week's material, as we're exploring through it, we will look at few different aspects. We'll look at types of muscles. We'll talk about characteristics of muscle tissue. We'll also discuss functions of muscles. And that sounds like a pretty good plan for me as we're making a start. As we're talking about muscles, the term muscle in English originates from Latin term mus, referring to a little mouse. Back in the day when they still didn't have the understanding of the microscopic dynamics of how muscles worked, there was a misconception that maybe there's something like little mice that generate that movement. Obviously, that's not the case. We will see later today that it's actually the actin and myosin filaments sliding past each other that are rather are little mice. So definitely a worthwhile thing for us to look at. I mentioned the three different muscle tissue types, and I think we became familiar during the first couple of weeks when we revised the basic concepts. You would have seen these also on your prerequisite classes, whether it was BIO 181 or BIO 156 that you took. But muscle cells, muscle tissues in the body, we can categorize those into three main categories. We had our skeletal muscles, and those are the muscles that we will talk about as we're reviewing the big muscles of the body that generate movements starting next week. We will see that these skeletal muscles are typically on a cellular level cylindrical in shape. We will see that they are striated. That's an important characteristic. And interestingly, we will see that they typically have multiple nuclei, and these nuclei are typically located at the edges of the cell. And sometimes my students ask, how is it possible that a skeletal muscle cell has multiple nuclei? Didn't we just learn that every cell has one nucleus? And that is true. This can be actually explained by the development process of skeletal muscle cells where multiple cells fuse together, and as a result, we're left with multiple nuclei within a single skeletal muscle cell. We won't spend as much time this week looking at cardiac and smooth muscles, but just quickly, we're seeing cardiac muscle cells have single nucleus, central nucleus, and striations. In addition, and these are the particularly important characteristics for cardiac muscle cells, these cells are often branched, and they also have structures known as intercalated discs at the end of these branches. So this branched appearance and having intercalated discs are important for us because they really tell us about the function of the cardiac muscle cells. And the function is to make sure that every cell within that same area contracts at the same time. So we want uniform action there. So this is why passing messages from one cardiac muscle cells to another is going to be important. What else? We're seeing smooth muscle, typically kind of a rounded cell, can take shapes depending on how it contracts. One single nucleus centrally and no striations. So these are non-striated muscle cells. Now, if we think where we can find these different cells, so skeletal muscle cells formed those big muscles that we will study in the subsequent weeks on the body, creating large movements of our body parts. Cardiac muscle cell found only within the heart, and smooth muscle found, for example, around blood vessels and within our digestive tract, regulating that passage there as well. Interestingly, skeletal muscles are under voluntary control, so you get to do that choice that I'm going to move this muscle and this is how I'm going to move it. That's something that you have a control over, whereas cardiac and smooth muscles are involuntary muscles. They will do their function without you having to think about it. You don't wake up in the middle of the night every once in a while thinking, I should have a heartbeat now. You don't wake up or even during the day think of, oh, I should change my vessel diameter to regulate blood pressure in the blood vessels with the smooth muscle. These are automatic processes, involuntary types of muscles. So I hope that that helps with that review. Like I said, we will be focusing on skeletal muscles. And when we focus on skeletal muscles, we'll be talking about muscle fibers as well. Let's have a look at that in a second. But before we do that, I do want to talk about four main characteristics of a muscle. These are really only body tissue with these properties: excitability, contractibility, extensibility, and elasticity. So let's unpack that a little bit, what these characteristics of muscle mean. So muscles are excitable or irritable. That really refers to the fact that they will respond to stimuli. We see that muscles are also contractile, so they shorten, so contract when stimulated. While I say that, I do want to though point out that muscle is still working, even if it might not be shortening or lengthening. For example, holding a heavy object, the muscle would be still working in that process. And I believe that this is how Pilates works largely, that we don't go around doing a huge amount of movements, but those movements that are being done are very intentional and do that kind of a working of a muscle, even though we're not seeing as large of a range of movement as quick of a speed happening. Muscles are also extensible, so they can be stretched in response to the force. And then we're seeing that elasticity, referring to really the recoiling of the muscles, returning to their original or resting length when the force that's stretching them is removed. So those were the 4 important characteristics of muscle tissue for us to consider. What we're seeing on this picture as well is a couple of notes when we're talking about training your muscular system, those skeletal muscles. Often how you tell a good personal trainer from less perfect personal trainer is by paying attention what they emphasize. And I think that a good or best personal trainers would emphasize, for example, training those core muscles in our body. I also wanted to make a quick mention about the importance of technique when we're training these muscles. So instructing a patient in an exercise that does not follow the line of pull will be less effective and could additionally place additional stress on already damaged tissue. So if you're going to the field of physiotherapy or so on, really getting that technique right is important. So that's why rather than going to the gym and just going crazy with the training, it might be more preferable that you get that technique honed down before you start pushing yourself. Next slide, I do have a picture of an injury, so if someone's squeamish, you can look away. This illustrates really how muscles often come in pairs, and we want to train those pairs equally. So, for example, we could have flexors and extensors, and if we only train one set of muscles of these pairs, we can generate an unequal power imbalance. And that's then going to cause us injuries, as we see on this athlete running who has snapped their leg bones broken as a result of that. So that's why it's so important that you are doing training that's based on best evidence, best understanding, not just on a guesswork. So I really encourage you to make sure that you're intentional and getting maybe the guidance that you might need if that's something that applies to you. So now that we've had a look of those wrong techniques, let's circle to look at functions of muscular system at large. And I have 4 functions that I want to talk about. Obviously, the first one is obvious for us. Muscles generate movement, produce movement. So our locomotion and manipulation of things is a result of that, whether it is walking, digestion, or pumping the blood, for example. These are all some kinds of movements that we are generating with the muscular system. Then let's have a look at the function of the muscular system when it comes to the posture and maintaining and maintenance of the body position. Even staying still is work. So I often in class setting would ask my students now to stand up and try to stand on one leg. What we're seeing when they're doing that is that your muscular system and your nervous system are working in uniform. You're constantly doing slight adjustments. So that is also crucial for us. Muscles help us to stabilize our joints. So skeletal system and muscular system work very closely together. We finished skeletal system talking about joints, so articulations of the bones. And what we saw was that most muscles crossed joint, but we also use those muscles to hold those joints still so that they're not just willy-nilly bending or moving around. Finally, the heat production of the muscular system, we see this typically as a byproduct when we're converting energy from one form to another. You remember we started this review by talking how we convert chemical energy into movement in muscles. So this is something that we see kind of as a, when we convert energy from one form to another, we lose some as the part of that process, and typically it's lost as a heat. That's usually why we get warm and why we sweat and why gyms get warmer, or they're kind of cooler to start with, to navigate that. But we can use this also to our benefit. For example, in a cold environment, your muscles can start to shiver to produce heat. They're not really producing movement that's productive of moving you about in the universe, but they're producing that heat as a byproduct to maintain that body temperature. Obviously, there's going to be other additional functions of muscles. They protect organs from kind of sphincters or control mechanisms, control your pupil size, some of the smaller examples, or the goosebumps. We talked about the erector pili muscles, the smallest muscles in the body, and how they were responsible for raising the hair as one of the adaptations that we see with the skin and integumentary system. So lots of functions, some more obvious, some less obvious for us. Let's keep moving onwards and focus on skeletal muscles. And what we see is that skeletal muscles really are organs made of multiple different structures. So we might see, for example, nerves passing those messages to skeletal muscles that we get commands to contract or relax. We see blood supply to supply those muscles. We see connective tissue sheets around the muscles. We'll have a look of that a little bit in the next slide, I believe. And obviously muscles also will include attachment structures, often anchoring them to bones. So let's have a look of a single muscle and zoom in. So as we move on this image from the left to the right, we're zooming in further and further, seeing enlarged structures. So what we see smaller and smaller fibers of the muscle. We're seeing each muscle and each muscle fiber covered in connective tissue, and we can then work from those. We're seeing our endomuseum surrounding the individual muscle fiber, perimuseum surrounding a group of muscle fibers known as a fascicle, and then epimuseum museum surrounding, being the most external, surrounding the entire muscle in this example. So a lot of those connective tissue adaptations to ensure the structure of the muscle as well. Often when we talk about muscles and we talk about how they attach and cross joints to kind of control those movements of the joints, the textbooks will talk about organs and insertions, organs being usually more proximal attachments, and we are seeing that these are to the immovable or less movable parts of the body, whereas insertions are usually more distal attachment points to movable bones. If you enjoy that way of reviewing the muscles, that's absolutely good. Anatomically, I think that the big thing for me is just that you know the attachment points, because those attachment points allow us to understand the concept of muscles working as levelers to produce movements. So sometimes we locate the muscles and then the structures where they work in not necessarily direct manner, and that allows us to add to the forces, as we're seeing on this diagram of this man using the wooden stick as a lever against the pivot point to lift the heavy load of a rock. So by moving that pivot point, we can alter how we capitalize on those forces as well. So it's really how far apart from the origin or insertion they are, how we're getting the mechanical advantage. And this would be the field of articulation biomechanics, which is an interesting field if someone's kind of enjoying both engineering and anatomy and physiology. That might be something that you might want to explore. Let's have a look a little bit of the microanatomy of the muscles. Here we're seeing that skeletal muscle fibers are these long cylindrical cells that contain multiple nuclei, and we will zoom in and study their structures. So what we're seeing is here one sarcomere. This is the plasma membranes of the muscle fibers, closing them, having sarcoplasm, the cytoplasm of the muscle. So within these, we have something known as myofibrils. We'll be focusing on actin and myosin in just a second. As we're seeing on this diagram, actin is typically a little bit thinner structures than these thicker myosins, and their overlap and the thickness of myosin really is what impacts whether light passes through or not. Light typically doesn't pass as well through these thick myosins, especially where we have overlap between actin and myosin. And these are what gives us those dark bands that we see in muscles on a microscopic level, whereas the thin actin filaments within the eye band are areas where light passes on a microscope very nicely through, and we see those lighter bands. So this is what really gives that striated appearance of a muscle for us, and I think that that's worthwhile for us to notice as well. Well, if we zoom into this structure arrangement of actins and myosins, I think that might be interesting. What we see is that actin and myosin overlap each other. I've also included on the right side of this slide an electron microscope image of the actin and myosin, so that you don't just think that it's my invention of these kind of theoretical diagrams. They can be actually visualized as well. And actin and myosin, as muscle strength lengthens and shortens, they slide past each other by these little feed-like adaptations of the myosin filament. And here we're seeing an elongated muscle on the left-hand side and shortened muscle on the right-hand side. And really this sliding of the actin and myosin filaments, like I said, is what we know as a sliding filament model of the muscle. So I hope that that helps to explain that. This is actually where calcium, when it locks in these actin and myosin ends together during the process after death, during rigor mortis setting in, is why we get these strong muscles that hold their shape, hold their locations, even after a person has passed away, or when person has passed away, they cause those actin and myosins to lock in place. I also wanted to include this diagram to make a point that we do have nerve impulses coming from neurons to the muscles. They form the neuromuscular junction, sending those messages to the muscles to do their movements, and calcium played an important role in that. I'm not going to include here on YouTube an image of rigor mortis. If you want, you can look the full lecture materials on the canvas. Like I mentioned, the calcium locks the actin and myosin ends together after the death during that process, and that's what is the characteristic how we see the rigor mortis setting in. This really concludes this kind of a nutshell review of the key points that I wanted to discuss as they relate to the highlights of this week's material. I'm not going to spend today time on going through examples of homework. I just want to say that remember, you have that simulation to work through. Give yourself a little time on that. Don't leave it to the last minute. It is enjoyable activity. I think many of you will find, and again, make sure that your technology works with you. Like I said, I'm always here to help you. Even though this week I do have a little longer response times, do not hesitate to reach out to me. That's very much one of my favorite parts of my job, having those interactions with my students. So please do consider doing that as well. That wraps up our session today. I hope that you have a very good week and continue to have a good week. And I look forward to seeing you on all of those virtual spaces. And let's make it a great week and work through the material. As always, let me know if there's anything I can do to help you. Until next time I get to interact with you, thank you. Bye.